All right, it's 1:30, so I think we should get started and we'll let others come in as they come and start with some introductions. So first off, we'd just really like to thank you for joining us today for our Learn at Home live lessons that we do every Thursday. We'd have 6 different topics that we touch on: trees, water, waste, soil, and our community forest and plants. And this is excitingly Native Plant Week. And we've got a ton of content available, a lot on our social media. So follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And then we also have a lot of content on YouTube. So if you go to the www.treepeople.org/learn-at-home, you will find our videos. This week we have a video on leaf profiles, and also one of our great employees, Kevin, doing a tour of the Santa Monica Mountains and introducing folks to different native plants. So definitely go to our website and check it out. Next week is Waste Week, which is a great week and very practical because there's a lot of waste reduction strategies that you can do at home. So check that out for next week. All you have to do is sign up on our Learn at Home website for our newsletter, and you'll get all the updates you need on that. All right, so I'll remind everybody again, we're really hoping that you can keep your camera off and stay on mute. The chat is available to use. We love hearing from you. We're going to have some interactive questions, so please use the chat, send comments, send questions. We will save the questions for the end of the workshop, but feel free to add them in, and I'll make sure to include them for the end part. All right. So Learn at Home is generously supported by the Gene Senator Legacy Fund, so we just want to thank them for supporting it. We also accept other donations. Everything that you donate goes to this Learn at Home platform and providing this content free of charge for folks in LA and across the US and the world. So we appreciate everybody that supports Tree People, especially during this time. And now I'd like to introduce our great presenters. We'll start with Chris. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chris. I'm Tree People's Director of Program Development, and I am passionate about our local native plants, and I even grow them in my yard. I've developed our how-to guides, resources, and videos through the years, and I'm super excited to share some of them with you today.
Great. Thanks, Chris. And we have Emmy.
Hi, I'm Emmy. I'm a youth leadership coordinator and project coordinator at Tree People, and I'm also very passionate about local native flora and fauna. And my job is to spread this passion and raise awareness about local environmental issues to middle and high schools across LA. So I would previously visit schools in person, but since the lockdown, we are still able to continue our environmental education virtually. So very grateful to be here, and thank you so much for tuning in today.
Great, thank you, Emmy. And to that point, we are offering live lessons for middle and high school teachers on environmental topics. So if you have any teacher friends or you are a teacher yourself, please let us know, because we would love to teach a lesson similar to this for your students. And I'm Ariel, by the way. I didn't introduce myself before, and I'm the Director of Environmental Education and Community Organizing here at Tree People. All right, so we'll begin without further ado.
All right, so planting a native plant garden. Makes me so happy to see people interested in converting their landscapes and using native and climate appropriate plants.
I'm also really excited to be co-hosting on this topic today. I started my conservation career protecting native fauna and flora and fauna in Hawaii, where I worked for several years in native plant management. And so for me, I don't truly feel connected to a physical place until I get to know the plants native to that area and region. So I hope by creating your own native garden, you also feel a heightened sense of place and connection to your local environment.
So everybody, you're welcome to take notes, but I wanted to let you know up front that we have a variety of videos, how-to guides, a native plant starter list that I'll show you today, and even a non-native climate appropriate starter list. All fabulous resources for you. All right, so let's get started. So today we're going to talk about creating a nature-based landscape. Can anyone here tell me in the chat room here, what do you think is a nature-based landscape? Any thoughts? Write them in the chat room if you've got them. All right, well, go ahead and click Ariel. It's when soil, water, and plants all come together to create a healthy, climate-appropriate ecosystem. And at Tree People, for us, it's one that works with the land, not just for looks, but also for environmental benefits. It has water, soil, and plants all working together and considers our weather and climate, available water, and healthy soil. So let's take a look at this more closely.
So in increasing a nature-based landscape, it's time for us to really reduce the use of grass. And that means reducing or eliminating, the extensive use of grass that we see across the US, but also in Southern California and Los Angeles. And choosing instead landscapes that have water, plants, and soil all working together. And when we do this, not only are we using less water and reducing the amount of green waste created, but it actually takes less maintenance. Don't believe me? Well, there was a 9-year study carried out from 2004 to 2013, and it was done on these two houses that we just showed the pictures of. The one with the grass and the one with the native plants over these 9 years showed that the native garden generated less green waste and maintenance because there wasn't weekly lawn mowing that generated grass clippings. And instead, once established, the native plant gardens typically at most need only monthly trimming and weeding. And what about the water? There was 83% less water used. So why so much less water? Why do you think there was so much less water used in the native garden? Well, it turns out because we're in a Mediterranean biome. So Los Angeles is in the Mediterranean biome, which is found only in 5 areas around the world. And this is typically found between 30 to 45 degrees north and south latitude on the western coast next to a large body of water. And in this biome, the climate is characterized by 6 months of cool, wet winters and 6 months of dry, hot summers. So in this Mediterranean biome, the plant and tree life native to these areas are adapted to this climate. So let's see what that means. So this chart shows that in Southern California, the first chart shows the rain level. If you can click onto the next slide, Ariel. Yeah, so you can see the rainfall over the year. It starts in January around 2.75 inches and then begins to fall after April and picks up again after October. So that's the rainfall pattern in the Mediterranean climate. But what does that mean for our plants? So in the next graph, you can see when we have high water need plants like lawns, they need most of their water in the summer when we have no rain. And so we end up using a lot of water to keep them happy and alive. And then in this next graph, when we have moderate water need plants like roses or jasmine, they don't need as much water, but still need a lot of water in the summer when we have no rain. And then finally, we see that when we have native or climate appropriate plants, they need most of their water in our winter months when it rains and almost no water in the summer. As you can see, native plants and climate appropriate plants follow the same line as our typical seasonal rain pattern. So this eliminates the need for wasteful excessive watering. And that is because they are climate appropriate, they are more nature based and work with the ecosystem of our area.
Okay, so now that you get a better picture of why using natives and other low water use plants is such a great idea, let's dive in on what to consider when planning your garden. So first, think about how you want to use the space, right? Do you want to attract wildlife such as butterflies, hummingbirds, and bees? Do you want to add fun elements like a bench or water fountain or a bird feeder? These will give you hints about the size, flower, and spacing of the plants that you choose. How about adding pathways? I personally have a gravel pathway through my front yard native garden, and I love it because the postman uses it every day. Think about adding small flowering native trees to add interest or shade. These will give you more hints about your design. Think about if you want to replace grass or just reduce it. It's also fun to consider colors, such as a garden of whites and yellows or blues and purples, or all combinations. I even choose plants that flower different times of the year so that I have flowers all year long. Think about variety of heights or textures to add interest. All of these things are fun to think about as you begin to plan your garden. When I redid my front yard, I thought about some of these things, but I've learned a lot along the way. And so before you choose your plants, there's actually more to find out about your space. You're going to need to do a little more detective work.
Yeah, so you have to determine what climate zone you're in, because a plant's performance needs to take into account total climate, which includes length of growing season, timing and amount of rainfall, winter lows, summer highs, wind, and humidity. So for our area in LA, we can use the sunset climate zones. These zones descriptions take all these factors into account and will guide you in choosing the right plants for your garden. So Sunset Magazine developed these climate zone maps for this purpose, and it's much more comprehensive and precise than the ones created by the USDA that created zones solely based on winter minimum temperatures. But the Sunset Zone map factor in not only the winter low, but also summer highs, length of growing season, humidity, and all the rest of the total climate. So are you located in this map? What is your climate zone? What is your climate zone, Chris?
Oh, I'm in the map before Ariel. You have to go back. I'm in climate zone 18 because I live in the San Fernando Valley.
Okay. What about this map? This map, the next map shows where I live. So I'm in West LA. So I'm in climate zone 22. So all of these different color codes represent a different climate that is going to be suited for different plants. So this guide, this map is a great place to know what zone you're in. And next thing you need to know is your soil texture.
All right. So soil texture tells us how much sand, silt, and clay we have in our soil. Go ahead and click that first. There we go. So sand is the largest particle. These particles are round and are about the size of the end of a number 2 pencil. You can easily see the individual particles. I mean, think about sand at the beach, right? Larger than this, and the particles are considered pebbles. Also, because water passes through it easily, sandy soil doesn't hold the water very well. I mean, think of a glass full of ping pong balls. If you were to pour water into it, all that water would flow through all that open space. The next element is silt. Silt is if you look at the picture there, it's the little red dot. So it's much smaller than sand particles. In fact, you'd need a microscope to see the individual particles. Silty soils are slick and slippery when wet, and then kind of like the texture of flour when they're dry. And then lastly, clay, you could barely see it on the screen there. It's the smallest particle size. In fact, it's so small that you need an electron microscope to see the individual particles. Clay particles, unlike sand and silt, they're flat. And so they're like a plate instead of round. And so they sit on top of each other, filling up the space, right? So there's not a lot of airspace in there. So when it waters, when water tries to get through, it takes a long time. So clay soils have a high water holding capacity. And so it's really hard for water to infiltrate. So the next click, your soil is probably a combination of these different textures, whether it's, it could be clay loam, sandy loam, silty clay, all the different characteristics, but it's really important to know. Because what does this mean for your plants? Well, as an example, some plants, say purple sage, do fine in a sandy or loamy soil, but not in clay. They like water to move fast through the soil, kind of like that image there on the left. they like the water to move fast through the soil. So if your garden has a high clay content, like the one on the right there, you shouldn't plant purple sage. However, white sage does fine in sandy, loam, or clay soils and could be a good alternative. All right. So to help you learn more about soil texture, we have instructions on how to conduct a texture by field test. Ariel will have those for you afterwards. But to give you kind of the basis of what you're doing, you take some soil from your yard, and you're going to eliminate kind of the bigger bits, like the bits of leaves and branches and sticks, so that you just have soil. And you're going to add water to that soil and kind of clump it together, kind of like Play-Doh. Now, this is going to start to tell you some indicators, right? On the instructions that we'll give to you, there's kind of a step-by-step. So if it's this kind of soil. If it's that, it's another, and it leads you kind of down through this chart. But essentially, for this first part, you're squeezing the soil together, and what you're trying to do then is you're going to be pushing the soil with your thumb across your forefinger to create a ribbon. And you're going to be taking note of whether that ribbon falls apart less than 2 inches, more than 2 inches, or something in between, right? Then you're going to take some of the soil into the palm of your hand and with some water, and you're going to note the texture, whether it feels gritty, whether it feels smooth and slick. And that sort of information, along with the length of that ribbon, are going to give you the combination of what your soil is. Another good soil test is the soil percolation test to see how fast your garden drains. For example, I put a rain garden in my front yard, and it was important for me to test to see if the water would actually drain, because in a rainstorm, when the water is being directed into that basin, I needed to make sure that it wouldn't have sitting water for hours and hours. So we have instructions for you, but basically you're digging a hole, filling it with water, and seeing how fast it drains. All right. So now that you know your climate and your soil type, you can begin to determine the plants for the space that you have. We have a native plant starter list and one for climate appropriate non-native plants. And you're going to love these lists. These are a favorite at our workshops because they're so comprehensive. We have pages and pages of suggested plants for you. And if you can look up close here, you'll see that this one is low plants up to 3 feet tall. It lists a variety of plants, and it gives it by scientific name, the common name. And then if you continue to move to the right here, and there is a legend, by the way, on the back of the list so that you understand what the different letters stand for. But under plant type, this tells you whether it's evergreen, is it perennial, is it an annual, whether it's deciduous, all good information depending on how you're planning your garden. Then next you'll see that we have the climate zone. And so looking here on this page, 18 to 24, it looks to me like both Emmy and myself, our climate zones could use any of these plants here. Then if you continue on, we've got it broken down by those climate zones on the whether it's a very low or a low water use plant. We've also got some that are moderate water use. And this is extremely important because this is telling you how to group your plants. And obviously the goal, as you saw, is to grow as many low or very low plants in your garden so that you're continuing to save water. So what you're going to want to do is pick plants that are low or very low and group them together. And if you have some plants like roses or others that are moderate water, then have them in an area. Because if you put a moderate water plant next to a low water plant, somebody's not going to make it because they're either getting too much water or not enough. All right, so continuing on. Oh, not yet. There we go. All right. So then you'll see in the next column, we've got soil, and that'll tell you, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, sun exposure, whether it's sunny or partial shade. Soil, we just learned about soil, so this will give you some clues. I mean, looking at this right now, it looks like deerweed only prefers sandy soil. So if you've got something that's has sand in it, it wouldn't be a good idea to plant that plant. And then the next column over, the height and width, this one is another really important thing that most people don't consider, right? So it's important in planning your garden that you're going to look at the size at maturity. Because what we often do is we go to the nursery and get a lot of small plants, and then we'll clump them all together so that we think it looks good now. But then as they grow, they're going to be pushing each other out. I made this mistake in my garden. I planted I believe a Yankee Point ceanothus, and didn't realize that it could grow to 4 to 6 feet wide. And so I'm constantly trimming it back from the sidewalk. So this is good to know. Flower color and the season. This is, as I was saying, it's fun to choose colors for your garden. So this will give you some hints. And then lastly, another great column is on the maintenance for that particular plant. So again, depending on your maintenance goals, this is a great thing to review before choosing that plant. Now, what happens sometimes is folks will use our list, find some great plants that they want. They'll go to their local nursery to see what is available, and then not be able to find them. So what you should do is first see if you can find something at the nursery that you like, that you're looking for by color and size. Then write down the common and botanical name. All right. And then because what happens is when you go to the nursery, you'll look at the labels, and oftentimes it'll say drought tolerant or California native, and that's just not specific enough. And even you'll want to avoid having to rely on that label also, because sometimes it'll say low water use plant, but you're not completely sure. So to avoid that, write that down. Write the name down, and then you're going to want to consult WUCLES. So WUCLES is a site that you can go to. It stands for Water Use Classification of Landscape Species, and provides guidance related to irrigation water needs for over 3,500 plants used in California landscapes. When you go to the site, you'll want to first click on the plant search database, and then you'll get to this page here on the left. So then you're going to click on the WUCLES list for all regions, which is located there at the top right of that page. Then it'll take you to the list where you can scroll down and find your plant. If you're in the Los Angeles area, you'll be looking at either the South Coast column, which is Sunset Climate Zones 22 to 24, or the South Inland Valley column, which is for Sunset Climate Zones 18 to 21. So find that column and scroll down until you get to your plant. If your plant's listed as very low or low water use plant, you're good to go. Now you know which plants would be perfect for your nursery and what will work with your garden. When you're done with your detective work, this is the time of year to plan and get your yard prepared, because the best time to plant is late fall to late winter. Why is that the case? Why is that the best time to plant? Anybody? Any thoughts about that? You can put your answers in the chat room. All right, well, as you remember from our weather chart, we get our rains beginning in fall when native plants like to receive their water. So to ensure that your plants will thrive, wait to plant until the fall. So instead, plan now and prepare your space for planting. If you're trying to kill off grass, you can sheet mulch through the summertime. We also have some resources at the end to give you, and there's a video that'll tell you how you can do that. If you need to build your soil, get the soil really healthy before you plant your plants, you can break it up, add a couple of inches of compost, and then cover that with a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch. and keep that moist through the summer. We also have a video on that as well. It also might be a good time to install a drip irrigation system, which is great because drip irrigation systems, especially for the native plants, will put the water down underground where the roots are to help get those plants established. Typical pop-up sprinklers that we have for grass lawns aren't really appropriate for native plants because you're pushing the water up and up off the top to where the leaves are, which when you would prefer to have them down by the roots. So when it does come time to plant, be patient with your plants. It takes a few years before they really start to fill in. So here on this next slide is a picture of a home before it got started, right? You can see all the lawn. And so they did some planning. And here we go. And you can see that in their planning, they thought about the different elements that they wanted, right? They've got a beautiful rain chain coming down off the garage, redirecting the water, and it goes underneath the pathway into a dry creek, what we call a swale. And they've created mounds of berms, again, to create interest. And what you notice looking at this landscape, as I was telling you, when you plant your new native plants, give them the space that they need, right? So it doesn't look so great right now, but in the next slide, you'll see that in just a year later, the plants are starting to fill out and grow and already looking better. And then just a few years later, boom, the plants have filled in. You can see the elements there. You can see the different textures. You've got different colors. Even the small tree that they've got there this time of year is when it doesn't have leaves, but is beautiful in another time of the year. All right. So in this next one I wanted to show you, this is my front yard. So I too removed my grass, and in my planning, I created a pathway. I've got a sitting area over to the right. But this garden I created is a rain garden. So I redirected my downspout from the garage across my planter. I created a very small swale that directs the water into the basin that I've created by building up the soil around it, creating berms. I've added some large rocks and then in the next slide, this is what it looks like now. It's been, this is just a couple of weeks ago. I desperately need to be out there and do a little bit of trimming and a little weeding in the garden, but you'll see that now my plants have filled in, they're growing, they're spreading, and I actually get color all year round. It's hard with this because you can't see a lot of the color on some of the plants, but when some of the color goes away that you see now, that plant in the foreground, not quite the foreground, kind of the blue-gray colored one, is California fuchsia that gets beautiful red flowers all throughout the winter. All right, well, now we're going to share some of our native plant favorites.
I love seeing the picture of your front yard, Chris. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So yeah, we have some native trees that fit nicely in a garden, such as the desert willow and the redbud, which are beautiful trees with vibrant pink flowers. I personally love them because it reminds me of cherry blossoms back home. Sakura season just finished, but whenever I see these trees, I'm like, oh, it feels like I'm home. And then we have shrubs also, native shrubs of different heights. So this Yankee Point ceanothus that Chris was talking about, I see these all over my neighborhood here around Westwood, and it's so beautiful. I just love that they're native plants, and they're low and spreading. And then we also have the sticky monkey flower. It's a small shrub. They come in different colors, and we also have lots of different types of manzanita to choose from. They have bright red, beautiful bark, peeling bark that is very distinctive with cute little white flowers.
Oh, and can I share something about the ceanothus?
Yeah.
For those of you, there's a secret about the ceanothus flowers that I love to share. when they're blooming, you can actually take the blossoms, put them in your hand, add a little bit of water, and then rub your hands together, and they actually create a lather, a soapy lather. I'm serious. And so if those of us who are looking for soap these days, there you go. You've got some
Wow, I have to try that. There's a bunch growing in my...
Yeah, it's great fun.
Ooh, all right, cool. Thanks for that fun fact. So we have our beloved sages: white sage, purple sage, bee's bliss, and we have tons of other types of sage. Hummingbird sage, I saw Chris had that in her lawn, one of my favorites. They all smell amazing. They have these aromatic oils that help them dissipate heat, which is one of their adaptations, and attracts pollinators, insects, and just looks beautiful as well. So always a favorite. And so, yeah.
All right. Yeah. So in looking to kind of recap, in looking at how to plan your garden, you can go ahead.
Determine what you want to do with your space. Determine your climate zone and soil texture.
You're going to use the plant starter list, highlighting what works with your space.
Google what the plants will look like when they're actually mature. I always, whenever I bring plants to a campus or students have projects, they don't know from just the seedling what the plant will look like. And then when I show them a Google image of the full-grown image, the plant, they're usually like, "Oh my goodness, it's so big, so beautiful." You know, so it's good to know exactly what they'll look like when they're fully grown.
Then, as I said, check your local nursery for what they have.
Check the WACO's website to confirm water needs.
And now, go do your detective work. Work on your plan, get your yard ready, and have some fun.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot of great information. I'm going to share the resources right now. As Chris mentioned, we have a ton of how-to videos on a lot of what she talked about. So these are the different websites for the how-to videos. And by the way, we will be sending out these resources via email as well. So you don't have to fully feel like you have to save all of them within the chat. We will be getting those out via email. And then this is a link to a Google folder that has all the different things that Chris referenced: the plant list, the soil texture test, all of those things. So we hope you enjoyed that presentation and are wondering if anybody has any questions for Chris or Emmy. And you can use the chat if you have any questions. Give it a few minutes, give it a few seconds.
Chris,
No
I have
questions.
for you.
What's that?
I have a question for you. What is your favorite native plant?
Oh, girl.
You had to pick one.
You know, I love what I have in my garden. So I have sticky monkey flower, 2 different colors of sticky monkey flower. I love my purple sage. I have beautiful yarrow that spreads and gets yellow flowers on it. Oh, and like you, I think we both love the hummingbird sage.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, Emmy, you tell everybody your favorite native plant and then we'll wrap up.
Definitely hummingbird sage. Their leaves make really great tea, which I don't know anything about. It's so fruity. So yeah, if you ever see a hummingbird sage, pick like one leaf, you know, not to harm the plant, and make tea.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. They get huge stalks of kind of fuchsia colored flowers, and they're a favorite, as of course, hummingbirds. But we do thank you for joining us, and the birds and the animals all. Oh, what about clippings? Can you grow plants that way? It depends on the plant. I know that willow trees that are native, you can use stalks from that and stick right into the ground. But I do encourage you, take some clippings, stick them in water, and get them to start rooting, and see what works.
Great. Good to know. Okay, everybody, we're going to wrap up here. We would love to see your videos and pictures of you planting your native plants in your new garden. So shoot us an email, follow us at Tree People, and tag us with Green Quarantine. If you have questions, there's the Learn at Home with Tree People at treepeople.org email. And if you love this content and want to donate, we would love donations for this work. So follow us. Make sure you subscribe to the newsletter at the Learn at Home website on our website, treepeople.org. And we hope to see you guys soon. We've got waste next week, and we're very excited for those topics as well. Thank you, Emmy and Chris. Really appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.